Hi guys, welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Reads. It is time for another weekly check-in, although this one's not quite weekly because I've been doing them Fridays and I didn't do on Friday. But it's Monday and I read some stuff over the weekend and last week, so I figured now's a good time to check in. It doesn't always have to be Friday, right? So let's talk about what I've been reading recently in the last week and a half. First of all, let's do a quick check-in with Anna Karenina. I am on page 386. I'm getting close to that halfway point. Originally, I was thinking I would just kind of marathon this through July, but I think we're gonna, carry it into August, and that's fine. It's chunky. It's a lot, but I'm still really enjoying it. I don't really have much else to say, but yeah, still working on that one. Last week I read Enola Holmes and the Elegant Escapade by Nancy Springer. This is book 8 in the Enola Holmes series. If you're unfamiliar with this series, it started out as a middle grade series. I would say it has advanced to a YA series now. But it follows the much, much younger sister of Mycroft and Sherlock Holmes, Enola, who I think the series starts, she's 14 maybe? 15, maybe? And her mother has disappeared, her father's dead, her mother has disappeared, and so her brothers come to take charge of her. Basically, the plan is to put her in finishing school, which of course she wants nothing to do with. She's very independent, and she wants to go do her own thing, so she runs away. And the first 6 books in the series kind of have this continuing story through all 6 books. I mean, each one has its own mystery. But then there's this kind of overarching storyline of her search for her mother, her relationship with specifically Sherlock. She's kind of hiding from him for those 6 books. They're kind of playing like a game of cat and mouse, basically. And there's other kind of ongoing storylines throughout the first 6 books. And then everything kind of tied up neatly at the end of that 6th book. Then there was a movie that came out a couple years ago or a year ago. And then Nancy Springer decided to write some more. So she wrote 2 more so far. I'm assuming there will be more. And book 7, I didn't like at all. In fact, I almost didn't read any more after that. It felt like it lost all the charm of the original 6. And I almost didn't pick up the 8th one, but I got the e-arc from NetGalley. So I went ahead and read the 8th one, and I'm really glad I did. The 8th book, this one that I just read, was a huge step up from the 7th book. It kind of recaptures some of that charm. She's still, even though she has a much better relationship with Sherlock now and they work together sometimes, there's still this kind of competition between them who can solve the case first, and that adds a fun element. You've got her kind of taking on some disguises again, kind of reminiscent of those earlier books. You have some returning characters. You have Lady Cecily Alistair, who, if you've read the first few books, you know who she is. She comes back in this one. And whereas I don't think this book is quite as good as the first 6, I do think it's a huge step up from the one before it. So, yeah, that made me happy. I will continue on with the series at this point. We'll see if Nancy Springer can continue to produce good stories featuring Enola. But moving on, I read The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. This is another YA, and this one is set in a magic school, or a school that has a magic school as part of it. And in this book, there are arithmetists. Arithmetists are people that can draw in chalk, and then their drawings can come to life. So they do like duels with each other by drawing like protective circles, and then they draw what are called chalklings, and these chalklings can go and attack the other person's defensive circle and back and forth. But out there in the wild, there are some wild chalklings. That's not supposed to happen. You're always supposed to have control of your chalklings, but there are some wild chalklings, so there's kind of this war going on. But we follow one teenage boy who is not a arithmetist, but is fascinated by them, so he studied them a lot. And then, of course, he makes friends with a girl who is a arithmetist, but is not particularly good at it. And so then, yeah, we just follow them through these events at school. Some things start happening. Some of the other students start going missing from the school, and there's evidence of these wild chalklings that have come in. There is supposed to be a sequel to this one, but I don't think it's real high on Sanderson's writing list right now. Hopefully we'll get it someday. The story did tie up, but there's more there, I think, to be had. So yeah, but I really, really enjoyed this one. It's very different than some of his other things. I always love the magic he comes up with, the magic systems he comes up with, and the way things work. And I enjoyed that in this one as well. Then I read a middle grade book called Across the Pond by Joy McCullough. This follows a family, a girl, a middle school girl, and her family who move from San Diego to Scotland because her parents inherit a castle, because that happens all the time. So they basically start a new life in Scotland. I love that idea. I love this concept of starting a kind of a new life and making new friends and this new culture and all these things. And I enjoyed the story pretty well. My complaint would be that I felt like the author introduced too many different topics or too many different kind of side plots that she then didn't dive into. Everything stayed too surface. She introduces the concept of the idea of bird watching, which is interesting, but then brings in sexism in bird watching. And can you guys hear the thunder? You probably can't, but it's pretty loud. But she, brings in that element to it, sexism element. She brings in talk about epilepsy and heart attacks and family and what makes a family and all these different kind of meaty topics, but then doesn't really dive into any of them. And so I would have preferred a few less topics that were dealt with a little more in depth versus just like hitting all these bullet points kind of. And we kind of lost, about halfway through the book, I felt like we lost the whole idea of, adjusting to a new culture and new friendships, and we're just kind of had all these other ideas thrown at us that, again, just didn't get fleshed out very well. Still interesting. I like the setting. Love a Scottish castle, but all in all, I thought it could have done more. Then this past weekend was a dewies 24-hour readathon. So I read 3 things. Well, I read 2 things and finished up 1 thing. Throughout the week, I had been listening to First Among Sequels by Jasper Fforde. I had been listening to this on audio during my drives to work. So I finished that up over the weekend. This is book 5 in the Thursday Next series. This was a reread for me. This is my 3rd, 4th maybe time. First time listening to it. I usually read them. And yeah, I love Jasper Fforde. I would consider him my favorite author. I love the Thursday Next series. If you're not familiar with it, Thursday Next is a literary detective. So when things go wrong in the book world, she has to deal with it. And it's hard to kind of dive into more than that. It's an odd series. I kind of stopped recommending it because I realized it's not for everybody, but I love it. And then the 2 books I read over the weekend, the first one was One by Sarah Crossan. This is a YA. I read a lot of YA this week. A YA novel written in verse, and it follows Grace and Tippy, who are conjoined twins. They are teenage girls, and it kind of starts, they are going into their junior year of high school, and they will actually be attending school for the first time. They've been homeschooled up until this point, but they will be attending school. So they'll have to make friends and all those things, which is hard enough when you're, when you don't have a major thing going on in your life, like being a conjoined twin. I thought this book had some really interesting things about it. I've never really thought about what it would be like to be a conjoined twin, or a twin at all, actually. But just the idea of everything you do affecting the other person, what you put in your body affects your twin because you share the body. And, when you're sick, when you both get the flu, one of you gets better sooner, maybe, but still has to just lay in bed because the other one's not well yet. Or, there's one moment where there's a storm going on outside, I think, and one of the twins wants to get up and go look out the window, but she would have to wake up her sister so they could go look out the window. Just things I had never thought about, like what that would really be like to be joined to someone else like that. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. It was a very fast read because it was written in verse. I kind of have the same complaint with this one that I had with Across the Pond. I felt like the author threw a few things at you that she didn't dive into. You know, issues of alcoholism and eating disorders. The twins have a younger sister who's a ballerina. And it's mentioned, like it's hinted at throughout the book, and you kind of pick up on that she's anorexic. But then they just outright ask her at one point, like, are you anorexic? And she's like, yeah, probably. And that's it. Like, it's never addressed. It's never dealt with. And I feel like if you're going to throw topics like that into a YA book or a middle grade book, they need to be addressed a little more than that. I'm not a fan of just, like, I realize that's a thing in real life, but I don't know. I just feel like it needs to be looked at a little more closely if you're going to bring it up in the first place. But I did enjoy this book overall. It's really interesting. Yeah, just some really interesting things to think about there. And then the last thing I read for the weekend was The Ogres and the Orphans by Kelly Barnhill. This is the new Kelly Barnhill book. She wrote The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which is very, very well loved. I liked it. I didn't love it like most people do, I think, but I liked it. However, this one was amazing. This is my new favorite book of the year. This is set in the community of Stone in the Glen. I think that's what it's called. Stone in the Glen, yep. Which used to be like this beautiful, like idyllic town where all the neighbors, you know, were friendly and shared what they had, and it was this perfect community. And then things started to go wrong. The library burned down. Everything just kind of fell apart. So it's kind of dealing with the fallout, everything not being good. And so the orphans, there's an orphan house there, 15 orphans, and they're the elderly couple that takes care of them. And then there's this ogress that moves in kind of to the edge of town, or moves out on the edge of town. And of course the townspeople don't trust the ogress. They blame her for everything that's gone wrong in their community. You know, all these ogres are terrible, and they're awful, and they do horrible things. And that's really not the case. And but it addressed really interestingly, like, who the real villains are in life, and things aren't always what they appear and aren't always what they seem. And you know, loving on people can make a huge difference. And it was really, really beautiful, and it made me so happy. And my reaction to it, like my emotional reaction to this, is the same as I had when I first read Sweep by Jonathan Auxier. Not just a good book, not just something that I will read again, but it is something that will stick with me, that I will return to again and again and again. And I loved this book so much, and would highly recommend that you pick it up. So that's it. That's what I've been reading over the last 10 days. Let me know down below what you've been reading recently. If you have any recommendations, let me know if you've read The Ogress and the Orphans and what your thoughts were. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.